The mirror in my tiny Brooklyn apartment was smudged, reflecting a warped version of myself as I slipped out of my work blouse. I didn't hear the door creak, but I felt her eyes, Lila's eyes, burning into me from the hallway. My breath caught, and instead of turning to confront her, I let the moment stretch, my skin prickling under her gaze. I'd known Lila since our freshman year at NYU, two misfits thrown together in a cramped dorm room. She was the quiet one, with her dark hair always falling over her face like a shield, sketching in notebooks she never showed anyone. I was the loud one, the girl who filled silences with jokes and dragged Lila to parties she'd rather avoid. For years later, we were still inseparable, sharing this shoebox apartment and a million unspoken truths. But that night, as I stood half-dressed in front of my mirror, something shifted. Her watching wasn't an accident. It was a confession. I turned slowly, my heart hammering. Lila stood frozen in the doorway, her wide brown eyes locked on mine. I didn't mean to, she stammered, but her voice was thin, unconvincing. She didn't move. Neither did I. The air between us felt electric, heavy with questions neither of us dared to ask. I could have laughed it off, thrown a pillow at her, made it a joke like I always did. But I didn't. I let her see me, really see me, and something inside me unraveled. New York City hummed outside our window, oblivious to the silent earthquake in our apartment. Lila and I had danced around this for years. The lingering glances, the way her hand brushed mine when we passed the coffee pot, the nights we fell asleep on the couch, too close to pretend it was nothing. I'd always told myself it was friendship, that I was reading too much into it. I was Sarah, the straight girl with a string of bad boyfriends, and Lila was just Lila, my best friend. But standing there, caught in her gaze, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Lila, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She flinched, like my saying her name was a physical touch. Why didn't you say anything? I stepped closer, the hardwood cold under my bare feet. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she turned and fled to her room, the door clicking shut behind her. I stood there, alone in the dim light, my reflection staring back at me. The girl in the mirror looked different now, vulnerable, uncertain, but awake. I'd spent years building walls around my heart, dating guys who never stuck, chasing a version of myself I thought I was supposed to be. But Lila's eyes had undone me in seconds. I didn't know what this meant, not yet, but I knew I couldn't go back to pretending. The next morning, Lila was gone before I woke up. Her sketchbook lay open on the kitchen table, a rare sight. I hesitated, then flipped through it. Page after page of charcoal drawings, cityscapes, strangers on the subway, and then me. Dozens of sketches of me. Laughing, reading, sleeping on the couch. My heart clenched. Each stroke was careful, reverent, like she'd poured her soul into capturing me. The last page was dated yesterday. A sketch of me standing in front of the mirror, half-dressed, my head turned slightly as if I'd known she was watching. I closed the book, my hands trembling. Lila wasn't just my friend. She hadn't been for a long time. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as straight as I'd convinced myself I was. That day at work, I couldn't focus. I was a barista at a hipster coffee shop in Williamsburg, and the endless stream of oat milk lattes and indie playlists couldn't drown out the memory of Lila's eyes. I kept replaying the moment, the way her breath hitched when I said her name. By the time I got home, I was a mess of nerves, ready to confront her, to demand answers. But when I opened the door, Lila was there, sitting on the couch, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. "Sarah, I'm sorry," she blurted before I could speak. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I couldn't help it." Her voice cracked and she looked away, her fingers digging into the edges of her sketchbook. I sat beside her, closer than I needed to, and the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "I didn't want you to stop." Her head snapped up, her eyes searching mine. For the first time I saw her, really saw her. Not just my friend, but the woman who'd been quietly loving me for years, hiding it behind sketches and silences. I reached for her hand, and when our fingers touched, it felt like the world clicked into place. We didn't talk much that night. Words felt too small for what was happening. Instead, we sat there, hands entwined, letting the truth settle between us. I didn't know what came next, how to navigate this, how to tell my family, my friends, or even myself what I was feeling. But for the first time I wasn't running from it. The days that followed were a blur of tentative touches and stolen glances. Lila would brush past me in the kitchen, her fingers grazing my arm, and I'd catch myself smiling like an idiot. We didn't label it, didn't call it love or dating or anything. We just let it be, let it grow in the quiet moments. Her sketching while I read, our legs tangled on the couch, the way she'd laugh when I burned dinner. But the world outside our apartment wasn't so gentle. One night we went to a bar with friends, a dive in the East Village where the beer was cheap and the music was loud. I didn't think twice about holding Lila's hand as we walked in, but I felt the stares, some curious, some hostile. Our friend Jake, who'd always been a little too fond of me, pulled me aside. "Sarah, what's going on with you two?" he asked, his tone sharp. I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but his eyes narrowed. "You're not like that, are you?" The question hit like a punch. I wanted to snap back, to tell him it was none of his business, but the words stuck in my throat. Lila overheard, her face tightening, and she excused herself to the bathroom. When she didn't come back after 10 minutes, I found her outside, leaning against the brick wall, her breath visible in the chilly night air. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice shaking. "I should have said something." She shook her head. "It's not your fault. It's just hard, being seen like this." She looked at me, her eyes raw. "I've known I was gay since I was 16, Sarah. I've dealt with this. But you're new to it. And I don't want you to feel trapped." "I don't," I said fiercely, stepping closer. "I'm scared, yeah. But I'm not trapped. I'm here. With you." She smiled, small and fragile, and I kissed her then. Right there on the street, under the flickering neon sign of the bar. It was my first time kissing a woman, and it felt like coming home. But the world kept pushing back. My parents called the next week, asking why I hadn't mentioned any new boyfriends lately. I dodged the question, my stomach twisting. Lila's family wasn't much better. She'd come out to them years ago, and they'd barely spoken since. We were building something beautiful, but it was fragile, and the weight of other people's expectations was starting to crack it. One night, lying in bed, Lila turned to me, her voice quiet. "What if this is too hard for you, Sarah? What if you wake up one day and realize you want something easier?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against mine, and promised myself I'd find one. The city never slept, but in our apartment, the nights were quiet, filled only with the hum of our breathing and the occasional siren outside. Lila and I were learning each other in a new way, like explorers charting unfamiliar territory. Every touch, every shared glance felt like a discovery but also a risk, because the world outside wasn't ready for us, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it either. Work became my escape, a place where I could pretend nothing had changed. The coffee shop was a whirlwind of orders and chatter, but even there I couldn't shake Lila from my mind. I'd catch myself smiling at the memory of her laugh, or the way her fingers traced patterns on my wrist when we watched movies. But then I'd see a customer's raised eyebrow when I mentioned my girlfriend in passing, and the doubt would creep in. Was I ready to wear this label? To face the judgment that came with it? Lila, though, was steady. She'd faced this world before, carried the weight of being out in a way I was only beginning to understand. One evening she came home with a new sketchbook, her eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in weeks. "I want to show you something," she said, pulling me to the couch. She flipped open the book, revealing a drawing of us, sitting on the fire escape, our shoulders touching, the city sprawling below. "This is how I see us," she said softly. "Not hiding. Just us." I traced the lines of the sketch, my throat tight. "It's beautiful," I whispered. But inside I was terrified. What if I couldn't live up to this vision? What if I let her down? That fear followed me into the next week, when Lila suggested we go to a queer art event in Manhattan. "It's just a gallery opening," she said, her voice casual but her eyes hopeful. "We don't have to stay long." I agreed, wanting to be brave for her. But as we stepped into the crowded gallery, my stomach churned. The room was vibrant, filled with people who seemed so sure of themselves. Artists, activists, couples holding hands without a second thought. I felt like an imposter, a straight girl playing at something I didn't fully understand. Lila fit right in, her quiet confidence drawing people to her. She introduced me as her girlfriend, and I smiled, but my palms were sweaty. A woman with bright purple hair asked how long we'd been together, and I fumbled, saying, "Not long," while Lila's hand tightened in mine. Later, as we walked home, she was quiet, her shoulders hunched. "Did I do something wrong?" I asked, stopping under a streetlight. She sighed, kicking at a pebble on the sidewalk. "You seem distant tonight. Like you didn't want to be there." "I did," I said too quickly. "It's just a lot. I'm not used to this." Her eyes softened, but there was pain there too. "I know. But I need you to be in this with me, Sarah. Not halfway." I nodded, pulling her into a hug, but her words lingered. Being in this meant more than stolen kisses in our apartment. It meant facing the world, her world, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough. The next day I called my sister Emma, who lived upstate. She'd always been my confidant, the one I turned to when life got messy. I told her everything, my voice shaking as I described Lila. The way she made me feel, the fear that came with it. Emma was quiet for a long time before she said, "Sarah, you sound happy. Scared but happy. Don't let the world take that from you." Her words were a lifeline, but they didn't erase the tension building between Lila and me. We were still learning how to navigate this, how to balance our love with the world's expectations. One night we went to a diner, just the two of us, and for a moment it felt like we were the only people in the world. We shared a plate of fries, our knees touching under the table, and I thought, this is enough. This is worth it. But then my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Saw you at the diner with Lila. You sure about this?" I didn't respond, but the message sat like a stone in my stomach. When I showed it to Lila, her face hardened. "He doesn't get to judge us," she said, but her voice was tight. I knew she was thinking of her own family, the way they'd cut her off when she came out. I wanted to promise her I'd never let that happen to us, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I kissed her, right there in the diner, not caring who saw. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt like a victory. Lila smiled, her eyes shining, and for a moment, the world felt a little less heavy. But the weight returned. At work, a coworker overheard me talking about Lila and made a snide comment about going through a phase. I laughed it off, but it stung. I started noticing the way people looked at us when we held hands, the way conversations stopped when we entered a room. Lila seemed unfazed, but I could see the toll it took on her. The way she'd tense when someone stared too long. The way she'd check her phone for messages from a family that never called. One night, we went to a rooftop party hosted by one of Lila's artist friends. The view of the city was breathtaking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. A guy I didn't know cornered me by the bar, asking if I was really into girls, or just experimenting. I wanted to punch him, but instead, I mumbled something vague and found Lila. She was laughing with a group of friends, her face lit up in a way that made my heart ache. I wanted to be that free, that sure. When we got home, I broke down. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted, tears streaming down my face. "I love you, Lila, but it's so hard. The way people look at us, the things they say." She sat beside me, her hand on my knee. "I know," she said softly. "It's not fair. But you don't have to have all the answers right now. Just don't give up on us." I nodded, wiping my eyes, but the fear lingered. I wanted to be brave for her, for us, but the world was so much louder than I'd expected. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Lila and I clung to the moments we could steal, lazy mornings in bed, late night walks through the city, her sketching while I hummed off key. But the outside world kept intruding, chipping away at our fragile bubble. I started to notice the cracks in Lila too, the way she'd go quiet after a stranger's stare, the way she'd check her phone obsessively, hoping for a message from her parents that never came. I wanted to fix it, to make the world safe for us, but I didn't know how. My own family wasn't much help. When I finally told my mom about Lila, her response was a hesitant, "That's nice, Sarah. Just be careful." Careful of what? I wanted to ask, but I didn't. I knew what she meant, the same thing Jake meant, the same thing the world kept whispering. This isn't normal. This isn't you. But it was me. I felt it every time Lila smiled at me, every time her hand found mine. I was falling for her hard, and it scared me as much as it thrilled me. I started researching, reading about queer history, about women who'd loved each other against all odds. It gave me strength, but it also made me angry. At the world, at myself for not seeing this sooner, at the people who made Lila feel like she had to hide. One evening, Lila came home with a flyer for a pride event in Central Park. "We should go," she said, her voice tentative but hopeful. "It's just a picnic, nothing big. But it could be good for us." I hesitated. The idea of being surrounded by people celebrating who we were was tempting, but it also felt like stepping into a spotlight I wasn't ready for. "Okay," I said, finally forcing a smile. "Let's do it." The day of the picnic was bright and warm, the park buzzing with laughter and music. Lila wore a rainbow pin on her jacket, and I felt a pang of envy at her ease. We spread a blanket under a tree, joining a group of her artist friends. They welcomed me warmly, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. A woman named Mia, with a buzz cut and a quick laugh, pulled me into a conversation about her photography project. "It's about queer love in everyday moments," she said. "You and Lila should be in it." I blushed, glancing at Lila, who was laughing at something another friend said. "Maybe," I said, but my heart wasn't in it. I wanted to be part of this world, but I felt like I was still learning the language. As the day went on, I relaxed, caught up in the joy of the moment. Lila and I danced to a street band, her arms around my waist, and for a while it was just us. But then I saw a group of protesters on the edge of the park, holding signs with words I couldn't read from a distance but could feel in my gut. Lila's smile faded, and she pulled me closer. "Ignore them," she whispered, but her voice was tight. We left early, the protesters' chants echoing in my ears. On the subway home, Lila was quiet, her head resting on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I thought it would be different." "It's not your fault," I said, but I felt helpless. I wanted to protect her, to shield us both from the hate, but I didn't know how. That night we lay in bed. The cities hum a distant lullaby. "Do you ever wish you could just disappear?" Lila asked, her voice barely audible. "Not die, just be somewhere else, where no one cares who you love." I turned to her, my heart aching. "I'd go anywhere with you," I said, and I meant it. But the truth was, I didn't know how to escape the world's judgment, or my own doubts. The next week I got a call from my dad. He'd heard about Lila from my mom, and his voice was gruff, uncomfortable. "Sarah, I just want you to be happy," he said. "But it's a hard road. Are you sure?" I wanted to scream that I was sure, that Lila was worth it, but all I managed was, "I'm figuring it out, Dad." When I hung up, Lila was watching me, her eyes searching. I didn't tell her about the call. I didn't want to add to her burden. Instead, I suggested we take a weekend trip, just the two of us. We found a cheap Airbnb in the Catskills, a tiny cabin surrounded by trees. It felt like a chance to breathe, to be us without the city's weight. We spent the days hiking, laughing, making love in the soft morning light. Lila sketched the mountains, and I read to her from a battered poetry book I'd found in the cabin. For those 3 days the world felt far away, and I thought maybe we could make this work. But when we got back to the city, reality hit hard. Jake showed up at the coffee shop, his face stormy. "You're throwing your life away, Sarah," he said, loud enough for my coworkers to hear. "You're not like this. You're better than this." I froze, my hands shaking as I poured a latte. "Get out," I said, my voice low but firm. He left, but the damage was done. My coworkers were whispering, and I felt exposed, raw. When I told Lila, she pulled me into her arms, but I could feel her trembling too. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice breaking. "Pretending it doesn't hurt." She looked at me, her eyes wet. "Then what do we do?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew I couldn't lose her. Not now, not ever. The air in our apartment felt heavier after Jake's outburst. Lila and I tried to hold on to the lightness we'd found in the Catskills, but the city had a way of seeping back in, bringing its judgments with it. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way Lila's shoulders tensed when we walked past certain neighbors, the way she'd lower her voice when talking about us in public. I wanted to be her rock, but I was crumbling too. Work was no longer an escape. My coworkers' whispers had turned into outright questions, some curious, some cruel. "So you're gay now?" one asked, her tone more accusation than inquiry. I mumbled something about not liking labels, but the truth was I didn't know what I was. I just knew I loved Lila, and that should have been enough. But it wasn't, not for the world, and sometimes not even for me. Lila sensed it, of course. She always could. One night, as we washed dishes together, she said, "You're pulling away, Sarah. I can feel it." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were storms. "I'm not," I lied, scrubbing a plate too hard. "I'm just figuring things out." She set down her sponge, turning to face me. "You don't have to do this alone. Talk to me." But I couldn't. Not yet. The words were stuck, tangled in fear and shame I didn't want to admit. Instead, I kissed her, hoping it would say what I couldn't. She kissed me back, but it felt different, tentative, like she was bracing for me to run. The next day, I went to a queer support group I'd found online. It was held in a community center in Brooklyn. A small room filled with folding chairs and people who looked as nervous as I felt. The facilitator, a kind-eyed woman named Rachel, asked us to share our stories. When it was my turn, I hesitated, then said, "I'm Sarah. I'm in love with my best friend. And I'm scared I'm not good enough for her." The room was quiet but not judgmental. A guy named Alex spoke up, sharing how he'd lost friends when he came out. A woman named Priya talked about her family's rejection. Their stories were different, but the pain was the same. For the first time, I felt seen. Not as Sarah the barista or Sarah the straight girl, but just Sarah trying to find her place in a world that didn't always make space for her. I came home lighter, ready to talk to Lila. But when I walked in, she was packing a bag. My heart stopped. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't look at me. "I got a commission in Chicago. A mural project. It's just a few weeks. Why didn't you tell me?" She zipped the bag, her hands trembling. "Because I didn't know if you'd care." The words hit like a slap. "Of course I care," I said, stepping closer. "Lila, you're everything to me. Then why do you keep pulling away?" Her voice broke and she finally looked at me, her eyes raw. "I can't keep waiting for you to decide if this is worth it." I wanted to argue, to tell her I was all in, but the truth was I was still scared. Scared of losing her, scared of losing myself. "Stay," I said instead, my voice barely a whisper. "Please." She shook her head. "I need this, Sarah. I need to breathe. And maybe you do too." She left the next morning, and the apartment felt like a tomb. I wandered through it, touching the things she'd left behind, her sketchbook, her favorite mug, the scarf that still smelled like her. I opened her sketchbook, hoping for answers, and found a new drawing, me sitting on our couch, my face a mix of hope and fear. Underneath, in her careful handwriting, were the words, "I love you, but I can't keep breaking." I cried then, harder than I ever had. I'd been so focused on my own fears that I hadn't seen how much I was hurting her. I wanted to call, to beg her to come back, but I knew she was right. We both needed space to figure out what this was, what we could be. The days without Lila were endless. I threw myself into work, into the support group, into anything that would keep me from falling apart. Rachel, the facilitator, became a friend, someone I could talk to without fear of judgment. She told me about her own coming out, how it took years to feel comfortable in her skin. "It's not about being perfect," she said. "It's about being honest." I started writing to Lila, not emails or texts, but letters I didn't send. I wrote about my fears, my love, my hopes for us. It was easier to be honest on paper, where I didn't have to see her eyes, didn't have to face the possibility of rejection. But the more I wrote, the clearer it became. I didn't want a life without her. One night, I went to a queer bar with some people from the support group. It was loud, chaotic, and freeing in a way I hadn't expected. I danced with a girl named Sam, who laughed when I admitted I was new to this. "You'll figure it out," she said, and for the first time I believed it. When I got home, there was a voicemail from Lila. Her voice was soft, tired. "I miss you," she said. "Can we talk when I get back?" I played the message again and again, my heart pounding. She was coming back. We had a chance. Lila's voicemail was a lifeline, but it also terrified me. What if she came back and I still wasn't ready? What if I'd already lost her? I spent the next week replaying every moment we'd shared, every mistake I'd made. I wanted to be better for her, for us, but I didn't know if I could. I kept going to the support group, soaking up the stories of people who'd walked this path before me. Alex, the guy who'd lost friends, invited me to a poetry reading in the village. It was small, intimate, and filled with words that cut straight to my heart. One poet, a trans woman with a voice like velvet, read a piece about loving someone who was still learning to love themselves. I thought of Lila and my eyes burned. After the reading, Alex and I grabbed coffee. "You're in deep, huh?" he said, stirring his latte. I nodded, staring into my cup. I love her, but I keep messing it up. He leaned back, his eyes kind. Love's messy, especially when you're figuring out who you are. Just don't stop trying. His words stuck with me. When Lila's return date got closer, I started planning. I wanted to show her I was in this, really in it. I cleaned the apartment, bought her favorite flowers, and even tried to cook her favorite pasta dish. It was a disaster, but I laughed instead of crying. I wrote her a real letter this time, one I planned to give her. In it, I poured out everything, my fears, my love, my commitment to figuring this out together. The day she came back, I was a nervous wreck. I waited at the airport, my hands sweaty, clutching the letter. When I saw her, my breath caught. She looked tired but beautiful, her dark hair tucked behind her ears, her sketchbook under her arm. She saw me and stopped, her eyes searching mine. "Sarah," she said, and my name in her voice was enough to break me open. We didn't talk much on the way home. The silence wasn't heavy though, it was expectant, like we were both waiting for the right moment. When we got to the apartment, I handed her the letter. "Read it," I said. "Please." She sat on the couch, her hands trembling as she opened it. I watched her read, my heart in my throat. When she finished, she looked up, her eyes wet. "You mean this?" she asked. "Every word," I said. She stood, crossing the room in 2 steps, and kissed me. It was different from our other kisses, fiercer, more certain. "I was so scared you'd change your mind," she whispered against my lips. "I'm done being scared," I said, and for the first time I believed it. We spent the night talking, really talking. She told me about Chicago, about the mural she'd painted, about how she'd missed me every day. I told her about the support group, about the poetry reading, about the letter I'd written. We laughed, cried, and fell asleep tangled together, the city's hum a soft backdrop to our reunion. But the world didn't stop turning. The next week we went to a friend's engagement party, and the stares were back. This time though I didn't shrink. When someone asked if we were just friends, I said, "No, she's my girlfriend," and felt a thrill at the words. Lila squeezed my hand, her smile brighter than I'd ever seen. Still, the challenges didn't vanish. My parents invited us for dinner, and I could feel their unease, their polite questions masking their discomfort. Lila was gracious, charming, but I saw the strain in her eyes. When we got home, she said, "They'll come around. Or they won't. But we're enough." Her words became my mantra. We were enough. But the world kept testing us. At work, a new manager made a point of scheduling me for shifts that kept me away from Lila. I overheard him muttering about keeping things professional. I wanted to quit, but we needed the money. Instead, I started looking for other jobs, ones where I wouldn't have to hide who I was. Lila, meanwhile, was thriving. Her mural in Chicago had gotten attention, and she was offered another commission in San Francisco. "Come with me," she said one night, her eyes bright with possibility. "We could start fresh." The idea was tempting, but it also scared me. New York was home, messy as it was. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized home wasn't a place, it was her. Saying yes to San Francisco felt like jumping off a cliff, but with Lila's hand in mine, I wasn't afraid of the fall. We spent weeks planning, saving every penny, dreaming of a city where we could be ourselves without apology. Lila's excitement was contagious. She talked about the art scene, the foggy mornings, the freedom of a fresh start. I wanted that for her, for us, but a part of me still clung to New York, to the life I'd known. Packing up our apartment was bittersweet. Every corner held a memory. Lila's sketches taped to the fridge, the couch where we'd first kissed, the fire escape where we'd watched the city wake up. I found one of her old sketchbooks under the couch, filled with drawings from our college days. One page showed us at a rooftop party laughing, our arms around each other. I showed it to Lila and she smiled, her eyes soft. "We were already in love back then," she said. "We just didn't know it." The move was chaotic. Boxes, goodbyes, and a tearful dinner with my sister, who hugged us both and whispered, "Be happy." My parents were harder. They came to see us off, their smiles strained. "We just want what's best for you," my mom said, and I nodded, but I knew they didn't fully understand. Not yet. San Francisco was everything Lila had promised and more. Our new apartment was small, with creaky floors and a view of the bay, but it felt like ours. Lila threw herself into her mural project, and I found a job at a queer-friendly cafe, where no one blinked when I mentioned my girlfriend. For the first time I felt like I could breathe. But even in this new city, the world wasn't perfect. We faced curious stares, whispered comments, and the occasional outright hostility. One night, walking home from dinner, a man shouted something ugly at us. Lila tightened her grip on my hand, her jaw set. "Keep walking," she said, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. At home I pulled her close. "I hate that this still happens," I said, my voice muffled against her shoulder. "It always will," she said softly, "but we're stronger than they are." She was right. We were building something real, something worth fighting for. I started writing again, not just letters to Lila, but stories, poems, pieces of myself I'd kept hidden. I shared them with her, and she'd listen, her eyes bright, sketching as I read. One night she showed me a new drawing. A portrait of us standing on a San Francisco hill, the city sparkling behind us. "This is our future," she said. "Messy, but ours." I kissed her, my heart full. "I want that future," I said. "With you." But the past wasn't done with us. Jake texted me out of the blue, apologizing for his outburst but adding, "I still think you're making a mistake." I didn't respond. Instead, I showed the message to Lila and we laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. We started building a community in San Francisco, friends from Lila's art circles, people from my cafe, a couple from the support group who'd also moved west. They became our family, the ones who celebrated us without reservation. At a gallery opening for Lila's mural, I watched her shine, talking passionately about her work. I felt proud not just of her but of us. Still, there were moments of doubt. Late at night, when the city was quiet, I'd wonder if I was enough for her, if I could keep up with her strength. She'd sense it, rolling over to wrap her arms around me. "You're enough," she'd whisper, and I'd believe her. One evening, we went to a pride festival in the Castro. The streets were alive with color, music, and people who looked like they'd found their place in the world. Lila wore her rainbow pin and I bought one to match. We danced, laughed, and kissed under a sky full of confetti. For the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter. It felt like me. But life has a way of testing you. Lila got a call from her mom, the first in years. Her voice was cautious, saying she wanted to talk. Lila was hopeful, but I saw the fear in her eyes. We decided to visit her family in Chicago, a trip that felt like walking into a lion's den. Chicago was cold, the wind slicing through our coats as we stood outside Lila's childhood home. She gripped my hand, her knuckles white. "We don't have to do this," I said, but she shook her head. "I need to know," she said, "if they can love me for who I am." Her mom opened the door, her face a mix of surprise and hesitation. "Lila," she said, then looked at me. "And Sarah." We nodded, stepping inside. The house was warm, filled with the smell of baking bread. But the air was heavy with unspoken words. Lila's dad was there, his eyes guarded. They'd known she was coming, but I could tell they weren't ready for us, for the reality of their daughter with another woman. Dinner was awkward, filled with small talk about the weather, Lila's art, my job. I could feel Lila tensing beside me, waiting for the real conversation. It came after dessert, when her mom cleared her throat. "Lila, we've missed you," she said. "But it's hard for us." Lila's voice was steady, but I heard the pain. I'm not asking you to understand. I'm asking you to try. Her dad shifted, his jaw tight. We raised you to be different. This isn't what we wanted. I wanted to scream to tell them they didn't get to decide who Lila was, but I stayed quiet, my hand on her knee. Lila took a deep breath. I'm happy, she said. For the first time in years, I'm happy. If you can't see that, I can't make you. The room was silent. Her mom's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Her dad looked away. We left soon after, the door closing behind us with a finality that broke my heart. In the hotel that night, Lila cried and I held her, whispering that she was enough, that we were enough. I thought they'd changed, she said, her voice muffled against my chest. They might, I said, though I wasn't sure. But we don't need them to. The trip wasn't a total loss. We spent the next day exploring Chicago, visiting Lila's old haunts, laughing at memories of her teenage years. She showed me the park where she'd first realized she was gay, the cafe where she'd sketched her first portrait of me. It was a reminder of how far we'd come, how much we'd built together. When we got back to San Francisco, something had shifted. Lila was quieter but not defeated. She threw herself into her art, creating a series of paintings about love and resilience. I kept writing, my words becoming bolder, more honest. We were healing together. One evening we sat on our tiny balcony, watching the sunset over the bay. Lila turned to me, her eyes soft. I want to marry you someday, she said so casually it took my breath away. I laughed, my heart racing. Someday. She grinned, pulling me close. Yeah, when we're ready. I kissed her, the city fading around us. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. We didn't get married right away. There were still battles to fight, jobs, family, the world's endless opinions. But we faced them together, hand in hand. My parents started to come around, sending us a card for our first anniversary. Lila's family didn't, but she found peace in that, in knowing she'd chosen her own family. Years later, at a gallery opening for Lila's new exhibit, I looked around at the people who'd become our world, friends, artists, the barista from my old cafe. Lila's paintings lined the walls, each one a story of love, struggle, and triumph. The final piece was of us standing on that San Francisco hill, the city glowing behind us. Underneath, in her careful handwriting, were the words, "We are enough." As I stood beside her, my hand in hers, I knew it was true. We'd caught each other watching, and instead of turning away, we'd chosen to see, to love, to fight. And that was the most beautiful thing of all.